when the war began. Israel's ambition was to destroy Hezbollah. And apparently it thought it could do it, but it did not destroy Hezbollah, far from it. It increased its prestige and strengthened it. It's still there, and it's rearming, and it's stronger than ever before. So it's there to fight another day. The Israelis did not destroy it, and the very fact that they didn't destroy it means that it was the same with Hamas. They didn't destroy Hamas either. So it retained its territory, it retained its ability to pursue its resistance.
يعني تعني بذلك أنه حزب الله فاز في كل جولاته ضد إسرائيل؟
Well, it didn't defeat Israel. I mean, it didn't. It was an inconclusive war. But I say that in terms of its own expectations and anybody else's serious expectations, yes, it was really a victory.
ليش كل الصحفيين الأجانب لما بدهم يحكوا عن لبنان دايما بدهم يحكوا عن حزب الله، حجم حزب الله، أهداف حزب الله؟ لماذا حزب الله دائما في المقالات في الكتب، يعني بكل الكتب اللي بنشوفها عن لبنان حزب الله موجود؟ هل هو المعيار أو المقياس؟ هل حجمه ودوره صار أكبر من البلد؟
Well, obviously, look, I've been living in Lebanon for 50 years, and as a journalist, it worked out that basically I never really covered Lebanon as such, unless there was something which interested the outside world. I mean, before 1975, Lebanon got very little coverage in the outside world. So it's the same now. It is Hezbollah, and all its implications, which makes Lebanon interesting to the outside world. It's as simple as that. I mean, I don't think there's a special focus on Hezbollah. Well, there is a special focus on Hezbollah because Hezbollah is this actor which makes Lebanon interesting internationally. I mean, for journalists and diplomats and leaders of governments.
بعد الفاصل الأخير الحرب السابعة آتية كما يقول ديفيد هيرست. عودة لمتابعة الفقرة الأخيرة من ترانزيت. ديفيد، الحرب السابعة اللي ذكرتها بكتابك من أين ستأتي شرارتها؟ هل ستأتي على خلفية إيران أم ستأتي على خلفية المأزق بعملية السلام؟
I think it could come from either of those and more, in fact. I mean, let us take Lebanon first and Hezbollah. I mean, there are good reasons why these two entities, Hezbollah and Israel, could find themselves at war again. I mean, I don't believe that in the long run Israel can live with an organization on its frontiers like Hezbollah. In the same way, for example, that it felt it couldn't live with Yasser Arafat's PLO in Lebanon, even though the PLO in those was much less of a danger to Israel than Hezbollah is today. But Israel feels the need to police its environment, and it feels ultimately that Hezbollah ultimately constitutes an existential threat, not necessarily in itself, but what it could lead to. And it keeps saying that sooner or later, inevitably, we will have to deal with this organization. So it's inevitable sooner or later. It probably grow out of some miscalculation, maybe, like for example.
ولكن بالفترة الأخيرة كثير الحكي والتردد يعني بوسائل الإعلام والكلام التصعيدي على موضوع الحرب، ومنه طبعا على خلفية الكلام عن صواريخ أسكاد. طبعا في تصريحات أمريكية، في تصريحات إسرائيلية، في تصريحات عديدة عم تتصاعد للحديث كلها عن موضوع الحرب. هل الحرب هذه المرة ستؤدي إلى نتائج سياسية؟
Well, it depends on what kind of war you're talking about. I was just laying out the possible forms which a war could take. Yes, there is this talk of war, and it takes a much wider dimension than simply a bilateral war of the kind which we've seen over the last 30, 40 years, strictly limited to Lebanon and Israel. This time, I feel there is a great potentiality for a Middle Eastern war. Like wars used to be before organizations like the PLO and then Hezbollah became the only protagonists on the Arab side. The next war in its ultimate dimensions could very well incorporate Hezbollah and Syria and Iran and Hamas and all those members of the so-called Islamo-nationalist resistance camp, or whatever you want to call it. And it could grow out of the nuclear confrontation, for example, or it could start with that, and the Iranian allies in the region could get involved as a result, or it could be the other way around. It could grow out of a Hezbollah-Lebanese confrontation. It's clear to me that the Syrians and the Iranians are more strongly intimating to the Israelis that they would get involved if Israel attacked Hezbollah alone. And Israel itself is saying similar things vis-a-vis Syria. It said it's going to bomb Syria back into the Stone Age last week if Hezbollah attacks Israel.
يعني هنا عم نحكي نحن عن مواجهة خارجية فقط وليس مواجهة بالداخل اللبناني.
You mean a domestic? I'm talking about a war between Israel and. You're
talking about. نعم، هون عم بدي أكد أنه ما تقوله هو مواجهة خارجية مع إسرائيل وليس أنه خلق مواجهة داخلية لحزب الله بالداخل اللبناني.
That's internal domestic politics. I see. Well, I do see certain possible scenarios, obviously, where a war between Hezbollah and Israel alone could produce internal repercussions in Lebanon. Because of, especially, of course, if Hezbollah were seen to start this war, but I do not believe that Hezbollah is going to do that, because it knows that that would deeply antagonize large sections of this society.
بدي أرجع لكتابك واللي ختمت فيه يعني الحديث عن سلام أوباما أو الحرب السابعة. هل تراهن على أوباما بوقف الحرب؟
Well, I say that if there is no, it's always been the case in the Middle East. Whenever there is no peace, or wherever there is no peace or no progress or visible progress towards peace, sooner or later, violence takes over. And I feel that we're approaching one of those points, but with new actors this time. As I said in my book, for the last 37 years, the only area of the only border of military confrontation between Israel and the Arabs has taken place in Lebanon. I don't include Palestinian-Israeli conflict in this. And what I'm saying is that this time it may be a Middle Eastern war. And this will grow out of the failure for the parties, the two sides, to achieve any peace or prospect of peace. That is why, Obama clearly thinks that too, and because he's saying he's saying to the Israelis, and I do believe that this is a serious showdown between the Israelis and the Americans. It's becoming more and more clear. If you don't help us to make peace by making your contribution to peace, then you will face a war, and you will face, and Hillary Clinton more or less said it, you will face a new kind of war, of a kind which you haven't faced before, against which you don't have real protection, i.e. a missile war. She said that. She and others have said that kind of thing to the Israelis.
ديفيد، الحرب السابعة هل هي الحرب السابعة العربية أم هي الحرب الثانية لإسرائيل على إيران؟
The second war against Iran.
بعد 2006 عم بعني.
Well, if it's a Middle Eastern war, it's clearly going to incorporate an Iranian and an Arab element. I mean, it's going to be, by definition, Iranian and Arab. I mean, if Syria gets involved.
هل عم بتقول هالشيء من بعد ما شفنا المشهد بدمشق اللي جمع الرئيس الإيراني محمود أحمدي نژاد والرئيس السوري بشار الأسد والأمين العام لحزب الله السيد حسن نصر الله؟
Well, I'm saying that that meeting and all that it implied, because it carried a kind of implication in a way that it wasn't formal, but you had a feeling that it was as if they might have been writing a mutual defense pact or something between all these parties. And that's why I'm saying that the next war is likely to be a global Middle Eastern war. And that was one of the episodes in the build-up to such a war, in my analysis. The Israeli, look, it works both ways. You could argue that the Syrians and the Iranians, by identifying themselves so closely with Hezbollah in such a meeting, were saying to the Israelis, look, if you attack Hezbollah, you're attacking us too. And the Israelis, so it's trying to tell the Israelis, don't do it, because, it's going to be very bad for you to take on all these enemies. A kind of deterrent strategy on their part. Similarly, the Israelis are saying, if Hezbollah attacks, we'll attack Syria too. In other words, they're saying, Syria, this time, don't take this risk. You're playing with fire. Well, you are going to get attacked too. You've stayed out of Lebanese wars so far, but this time you're going to be burned as well.
سؤال أخير ديفيد، شعورك هل فعلا رح يكون في حرب هذا العام؟
No, I don't think so. I don't.
ديفيد هيرست الصحفي البريطاني، شكرا لوجودك معنا ببرنامج ترانزيت. وبدي أذكر أنه الكتاب اللي صدر من نيويورك تحت عنوان احذروا الدول الصغرى هو موجود بكافة المكتبات وهو صادر باللغة الإنجليزية. ديفيد، شكرا لك، شكرا لوجودك بترانزيت. مشاهدينا، بالختام ذكروا لما تطفوا الشاشة الأحداث ما بتوقف. ترانزيت الأسبوع المقبل نفس الشاشة نفس الوقت.